All right, fellas, I'm going to need you guys' assistance this evening. I got to lean on you. I'm playing hurt. Ever since I got back from LibertyCon, man, I have picked up some sort of a hellified head cold or something that's just flat kicking my butt. I got the sexy phlegm voice going on. Friends, fans, you catch that reference. But anyway, I'm loaded up. I got lozenges. I got a cough button. I got Kleenexes. I'm ready to roll. So I'm going to need you guys to catch my back.
You're going to need to go ahead and take the NyQuil now, then.
Well, who says I didn't already take the NyQuil? But, we can, never hurts to double up on these things. One can never be too careful in this line of work.
Yeah, just make sure you stay on your side of the mic. We don't need to be transferring anything here.
Yeah. All right, dudes in hyperspace. Ep4. Here we go.
We show onboard computer synchronization.
Now entering the nexus of geekery and guy world. In 3, 2, 1, mark.
Hello, IT? Have you tried turning it off and on again?
This is the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast, a service of Shark Flight Publishing.
Hey kids, welcome again to episode 4 of the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast. I'm your host, Ian J. Malone. We are online. If you want to find us, we're in all the usual places. You can find us at, of course, the web internet thingy at dudesinhyperspace.com. We're also on Facebook at The Hyperdudes. Same thing for Twitter at The Hyperdudes. You can also follow us on YouTube and subscribe to our channel. And if you got questions for the show, you can always email us at dudesinhyperspace@gmail.com. So, as mentioned, lots of good stuff to talk about this evening. We got Spider-Man Far From Home. We've got Stranger Things Season 3 is out now. Also want to kind of delve off into the realm of sports broadcasting. One of the things that happened while we were away was the retirement of Darrell Waltrip from the broadcast booth at Fox. And that was something of a controversial thing. Now, we are not going to spend an entire half of a show talking about NASCAR broadcasting, but what we will do is kind of use that as a springboard to talk about the youth movement that's been going on in sports. Whether it's with the NFL, whether it's with Sunday Night Baseball, it seems like everybody's chasing that kind of magical booth combination, and they're not afraid to shake some things up with some new talent. So we will certainly get off into that. But before I go any further, fellas, what goes on? How we doing this evening?
I am doing very well, sir. Getting home late from work, but getting the chance to relax for a few minutes and chat with you two fine fellas. I'm having a grand old time.
I saw your pictures from down in the Keys. I don't want to hear any complaining out of you, man. You got nothing for me.
Oh, you saw that?
I did see your pictures from down in the Keys, yes.
That's good because I tagged you in them.
The nice GoPro pictures from under the sea, as it were. It was very, very nice. I'm very jealous. Scott, what's up?
Well done, Dave. I didn't realize you were down in the Keys. We just kind of hung around here for the old holiday weekend and got to catch in minor league game, fireworks show. Nobody does it better than minor league ballparks when it comes to the old 4th of July fireworks show. So hanging out. There's also a little thing called the Women's World Cup soccer final this weekend that my daughter and I got to spend some time watching, and the whole family. So happy with the outcome there, and just ready to get back into another stretch at work, and hopefully start to catch up on things like a Spider-Man movie, I guess.
Aye. You mentioned minor league baseball, and we got Stranger Things on tap as one of the things to talk about. Here in Durham, they're doing Stranger Things Night coming up this Thursday evening at the ballpark here in Durham. Turns out, and I did not know this until obviously it was smeared across every news outlet here in the Triangle, the guys who created that show are from Durham, North Carolina. So a lot of the stuff that they've kind of themed Hawkins after is from this kind of part of North Carolina, whether it's Chapel Hill, Durham. There's some shout outs in there to Greensboro and stuff out of the Triad. But this part of the state is kind of very well represented by those guys. So kudos to them. I'm actually really jazzed to go check that out. They turned the whole concourse into like Hawkins Land with signs and everything over all the like typical minor league baseball stuff, but with Stranger Things. So the guys, I think, are going to be wearing ball caps that look like the Dustin's cap with the blue and white, the white front with the red bill
Yeah.
and all that on it, but it's gonna have the Bulls logo on it. So yeah, I'll take pictures, post
Yeah.
to social, all that stuff.
They definitely led the charge there in Durham. As soon as Stranger Things came out and it started hitting the mainstream, they were one of the first teams to do a Stranger Things night. So they, themed jerseys,
Yeah.
everything on the video board is, all the graphics are done up. So it'll be fun. Hopefully you get a chance to get out there and see that. That'll be a good time.
Yeah,
See, when you said Stranger Things at the ballpark, I just figured they were going to take away the juiced balls they took over to London, so then there wouldn't be as many home runs.
No. Nope. We're gonna dial up the Netflix magic instead. So this is I think the second year that they've done that, and it was a huge hit last year. I don't know if it sold out, but it was close. Anyway, good stuff, man. Minor League Baseball, we sing their praises all the time on this show. So all right, let's get down to it. What do you say we do the news?
Let's do it.
And now the news.
All right, so lead story. It would appear that Marvel has got themselves another hit on their hands. Spider-Man Far From Home debuted this past weekend for 4th of July, bringing in an impressive $185 million domestically with another $395 internationally. So it's not a bad haul, one might say. Film topped out at the end of the day Sunday with a staggering $580 million worldwide. Film stars Tom Holland as obviously Peter Parker. Samuel L. Jackson is back as Nick Fury. Clearly it's a hit with audiences. Currently it's got a 96% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's also a hit with critics as it's standing currently at 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. So shifting gears to television, and as we have noted very well now, Stranger Things Season 3 debuted on Netflix this weekend, July 2nd actually, and in 4 days' time has already become the most watched event in the history of Netflix. At present, it's got 40 million total views so far, 400 million views so far, with 18 million complete season binge watches. And those numbers all come courtesy of Netflix, which, as I understand it, they don't share very often. So kudos to them, and that was actually right the first time. 40 million. Sorry, I got a cold. Lastly, in comics, comic fans got a little bit of a surprise last week. Robert Kirkman broke the internet by saying, yeah, we're done here with the Walking Dead comic. They decided that 193 issues was enough, and so issue 193 debuted on July 2nd, and that was the finale to a 16-year running comic that has obviously led to 2 hit television shows and gobs of awards. When Kirkman was asked why he's decided to shut down the operation, he said, quote, "I hate knowing what's coming." And then he went on to spew a bunch of stuff about how he thinks, frankly, the comic industry can get a little complacent at times. And he just wanted to shake some things up by doing things that aren't normal. So they decided 193 is enough, and that is the end of The Walking Dead. In comic form, honestly, we can only hope that the end is nigh for the television series, but that's another conversation for another day. But that, friends, is the news. So, all right, Spider-Man Far From Home. I am the only one who saw it. That's fine. I will opine briefly, and then we'll dump into some Stranger Things, because, Dave, I do know that you've had a chance to binge through that. Spider-Man Far From Home, man, Marvel just knows how to do it. When they're clicking on all cylinders, they are tough to beat. I will say I didn't think this one was as good as Homecoming. Probably because I just didn't really have a whole lot of expectations for Homecoming. And those are the best movies. Those give you the best surprises. This one was very, very well done. It had a lot of the heart that made Homecoming really, really good is back in this film. And by that, I mean kind of the social awkwardness that is a kid in high school with superpowers. They nailed that with Tom Holland, and they nailed it again with this one. Another thing I really enjoyed about this film, I'll be honest, I thought Mary Jane, or MJ, whatever her name is in this one now, I don't think it's Mary Jane anymore, it's just MJ. I thought she was pretty obnoxious in Homecoming. That was one thing about the reboot there that I was not happy about. I thought she was shrewd and shrill and obnoxious and frankly just annoying. But they give her a bit more time in this one, and you get a chance to kind of get under her skin and figure out that she's really not that person at all, as is the case with a lot of kids in their teenage years. Most of that crap is just a front because they're way too insecure to deal with their own stuff. But now, don't get me wrong, she's still a badass in her own right. But they really kind of pull back the curtain a bit on that character in this one, and really bring to light some of the stuff about her that is very, Mary Jane Watson. Even though that's not her name anymore, they really nailed it with her. So some good stuff there. The one thing that I did not really get out of this film, where I thought they kind of fell short, was the Mysterio character. I'm not a Jake Gyllenhaal guy. I think Nightcrawler was probably the only film I've seen him in that I thought, man, that's a solid performance. I just didn't like the Mysterio character. I don't know if he was supposed to be some sort of a commentary on the media or what, but there was never anything scary about him at all. He was not, I don't know, he wasn't Venom bad from Spider-Man 3, but or Sandman bad from Spider-Man 3, but I don't know, I didn't buy him. He worked well enough to drive the story and to convey what the writers wanted to get out when they wrote that script, but I just didn't buy him as a bad guy. But now, one thing I will say about Spider-Man, and I will kind of close with this film does some things that really changes the game for Spider-Man. As Marvel is wont to do, there is a mid-credit scene and a post-credit scene. Post-credit scene is really just kind of a ha-ha. There's really not much to that. It's just a kind of a cutesy thing for fans. The mid-credit scene, on the other hand, it's kind of important moving forward. You're going to need to stay through and at least watch that. So anyway, all in all, I'm going to give the film a good strong B+. Again, I loved all of the kind of the sweetness that was Spider-Man Homecoming. It's back in this film. Tom Holland's great. The relationship with the girl is fantastic. Him trying to figure out what he's going to do there, while just trying to figure out how to be a kid, that's 16 years old while having all the weight of the world on him, particularly in the aftermath of Endgame. Tom Holland nails it, man. I mean, he really, really does. Well, again, I wasn't wasn't a big fan of Mysterio, but so that's why I'll probably drop it down to a B+. But all in all, very, very, very good watch, and very, very much worth your time. I would say if you're going to pay full freight at the theater for this one, you're probably going to get your money's worth. I don't say that about a lot of films. Most time I say do a matinee, catch it to the cheap seats, or maybe even wait till Redbox, like I do for a lot of these. But Spider-Man, they did it, man. I mean, it's a fun flick. If you liked Homecoming, you're going to dig this one. So I'm going to step off the mic now and get some water, because my LibertyCon cold is really kicking my butt right now. So talk about something, fellas.
As an aside on that, and I don't know if either one of you have seen this or not, but kind of on the same subject, have either of you watched Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse?
Yes. We were able to catch that on Netflix, and man, that was really good.
I enjoyed it too. If you look at what's going on with that, and it makes fun of some of the earlier stuff going through, I think that the story was good, and it's kind of it's got that Disney-esque quality of kids are going to like it because there's a little bit of that going on. There's a little bit of everything there, but also as an adult, as a 40-year-old man, and just being a Spider-Man fan, I really enjoyed it. The story was there, and I think that it was a good payoff all the way around.
Yeah, it was a good step back into some of that nostalgia around Spider-Man that I at least I see harkens back to the old animated cartoons. They did a bunch of different animation styles, each one exclusive to the type of character that they brought into the story, which I thought was great. Kingpin to me was a great character throughout the whole thing. Fit the mold. Was ridiculously oversized, just like I remembered and think of him as being, and it was good to see a different take on what a teenage Spider-Man goes through, and what that can mean for the different stories that come out of it. So I thoroughly enjoyed it.
We went to go see Spider-Verse when it was in the theaters. We took my kid to go see it, and Natalie and I both enjoyed it as much as he did, if not maybe even a little bit more. And both of you guys touched on this just a second ago. It was just a really fresh take on Spider-Man, and I think in a day and age when everybody's kind of looking to reboot characters as minorities or different genders or what have you, this was just its own story. You'd never met this kid before. He is not Peter Parker. He's something completely different with a charm and a story all his own. And they wrote a great script. They assembled a fantastic voice cast. And yeah, Spider-Man was, man, I gave that one a solid A. Riot Out. It was fantastic. If you haven't seen that one, folks, definitely get it. It is on Netflix right now, so check it out. So, all right, shifting gears to Stranger Things. Dave, you had a chance to see it. What did you think?
I was gonna say, speaking of Netflix, here we go. Man, Stranger Things. It's been the first season when it came out. It took me a little bit to get into it to actually get someone to tell me you've got to watch it. Really, really, really got to watch it. So after watching it, man, I tore through season two, and was a little disappointed with season two. I felt like they were kind of telling the same story to a certain extent, some of the same stuff over and over, and it felt like it was okay. Well, they got lazy with some stuff. They had to get something out pretty quick. I like this season a lot more. The story is different to a certain extent. There's a lot more delving into the characters, and especially the characters that you didn't get the chance to see in the first two seasons, how they got into them. Interviewed or introduced, should I say, a couple more. And of course, anything that Carrie Elwes is in, I'm there. When the Man in Black shows up, I'm there with it. So I think B plus, B plus, A minus. I thought it was a really good story. I thought it was a really good show, and it kept you all the way through. It lacked in a couple of spots, but I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I'm hoping I don't get fruit thrown at me for this. I enjoyed it. I did. I enjoyed it for all the same reasons that I enjoyed Stranger Things seasons 1 and 2. Having said that, if they're not going to do something drastically different with season 4, which is already confirmed that season 4 is happening, I got to be honest with you, man. I'm not. I'm just not as overly thrilled about it as I have been these past couple of years. I feel like they've told pretty much the exact same story for 3 straight years. And I enjoyed the nostalgia. I mean, that's one of the things that drew us to this. Is it was so much fun. It harkened back to all of the cool crap that we grew up with in the 1980s. But you can only ride that bus for so long before it finally gets a little bit old. And to me, that's kind of all that's really hanging on with Stranger Things. I mean, really, if you stop and think about it, and I'm not spoiling anything with this, I mean, what's the story of this show every year? Big evil thing comes to Hawkins, freaks everybody out, the kids figure it out, they get into a pickle, 11 saves the day, credits. And that's pretty well it. And that's pretty well what you get here. Now, there are a couple of turns, toward the end of the season in season 3 that are definitely different, definitely change some things. But at the end of the day, that's pretty well the exact same story that you're getting here. Everybody knows the Russians are involved. I still don't have a clue why they were there. It was very much just all right, it's 1985, it's Cold War, Russians, get them in there. I mean, you were really just kind of missing Dolph Lundgren, and you had the whole cliche. So, I mean, listen, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun, but I need something fresh for season 4 if we're going to keep on with this. I don't want to see the same story for a 4th year in a row. That was kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I think this is one of those series that when you take a look at it, you're going to want to. You hope that they don't go 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 seasons. That they realize they sort of caught lightning in a bottle with a story, has some good nostalgia. We're gonna tell a few seasons of this, and then we're gonna wrap it up and put a nice little bow on it and move on to our next project. So I hope that they don't get that greedy, money hungry. Hey, maybe if we just do one more season, let's see what that looks like on the balance sheet.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that. There was an interview this past week with the creators of the show, the Duffer Brothers, and they made it clear to Netflix. Listen, we wrote a 4-year show. That's the arc of what we have to tell here. This is a 4-year show, and the Netflix exec who was interviewed in that article said we're really gonna try and squeeze him for at least one more year beyond that, obviously. But that was kind of what they told us, was this is a 4-year story. So we'll see how that plays out. Clearly, these guys have one more year that they want to tell, and so I'll certainly watch it. I won't not watch season 4. I'm invested at this point. But like I said, I'm hoping that they do something. But I'm exactly with you, Scott. I'm a fan of let's not draw this out. Tell your story. Supernatural is like the classic example of a show that just went on too dadgum long. Thank God they're finally putting a bullet in that old yeller this fall.
I was about to say cough, cough, Supernatural.
Dude,
cough, cough.
Man. I mean, that was a show that was clearly mapped out to be 5 years. A 5-year story. That's what the guy who created the show said. I wrote a 5-year story. And when you watch the end of season 5, you can clearly see where that was originally conceived to be the definitive end of the show, and frankly, it should have been. But but it is what it is. They're all getting paid, and trust me, those guys aren't arguing with the check, and neither, I'm sure, will the Stranger Things guys. But that is what makes you respect a guy like what's his face, who created Breaking Bad. He said, "Listen, I have a story to tell, and when I'm done, it's going to be over. And you can throw all the money you want at me. That's the end of my story, and peace out." And that's one of the reasons I think why Breaking Bad will go down as one of the greatest shows ever.
Yeah, it was Vince Gilligan. Yeah, Vince definitely knows how to tell a story.
The other thing that becomes difficult especially when you have a younger cast, is the changes in what these cast members look like from year to year, season to season, is pretty drastic over a short period of time. So, what may have been an aesthetic or a look that you were going for in year one may not be the case in year four. These actors grow up. They, their face changes, their voice changes. You're asking these folks to keep a hairstyle possibly for longer than they would normally like to in the real world. So there's some challenges there when you start getting seasons 5, 6, 7, 8. Like what is you kind of have to write that into the timeline, and if that doesn't fit the narrative of your story, then it can get a little awkward.
I can remember that being one of the reasons why Michael Rosenbaum was ready to leave Smallville. He was so sick of shaving his head. By the end of it, he was just like, "I'm out. If you want me to come back, I'm using a bald cap, and we're done here." Scene.
Well, that and his co-stars kept trying to steal his girlfriends for a cult.
Dude, I'm going to tell you, if you ever get a chance to make it out to a convention that Michael Rosenbaum is doing a Smallville panel, go quickly. That guy's hysterical. He's actually got his own podcast now, which you can check out. I went and listened to a couple of episodes of that because he had Smallville Week a while back, and every day he brought in somebody from the show, whether it was Tom Welling or Kristen Cruick or whatever. So it was neat to hear where all those folks are now and hear what they're doing. But also, now almost 10 years removed from the end of that show, to be able to hear kind of them reflect on what their time was like on that, and et cetera, et cetera. Clearly, that guy still wants a crack at Lex Luthor on the big screen. Clearly. And I hope he gets it at some point. He won't, but that would be awesome.
Yeah, he definitely played that part. I'd love to see that. I don't know anybody else right now that I could really say that person needs to play it if they ever do it again.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, there was one guy that they were talking about for the cinematic version, and I think honestly that was probably one of the biggest things that killed the Social Network kid from Zombieland. I forget his name. Eisenberg. There you go. I don't remember him because he wasn't memorable and it wasn't worth remembering. But anyway, they were talking about having Cranston come on as Lex Luthor, and that would have been epic. But I digress. So back to Stranger Things. That was pretty well my take on it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. If you're a Stranger Things fan, then it's going to hit all the high notes for you. You're going to enjoy it. Just don't expect anything terribly original until you get to the last couple of episodes. And then again, there are some turns in there that are different. It's going to be that way with every television show. But from top to bottom, yeah, it's just kind of more the same for me. So that was that. So, alrighty, well, kind of shifting gears out of geekery for a little while. Something else happened, and I mentioned this at the outset of the show. Something else happened that was, in NASCAR land, fairly big news while we were away, and that was the retirement of Darrell Waltrip from broadcasting. For those who remember NASCAR at its pinnacle, right around the late 90s, early 2000s, the big moment, other than obviously the end of the 2001 Daytona 500, was the signing of Fox Sports to be the major television partner for NASCAR. Darrell Waltrip was very much at the forefront of that. The guy literally got straight out of the car and straight behind a microphone. And for years, he has been the voice of NASCAR broadcasting on Sundays. Well, he's also gotten quite a bit older over the last, 17 years. This is a trend that we have seen in all sports, not just NASCAR, and that's kind of where I'm headed with this. There was an article published by Jenna Fryer in the Associated Press back on April the 2nd, basically, and the article was titled, "Boogity, Boogity, Boogity, Time for Fox to Change." And basically the gist of her entire column was, the shtick is old, guys. All right, this guy is 20 years removed from a car. He doesn't know anything about the cars of today. He's not connected to the drivers. He's not connected to the sport beyond an outsider's point of view with a microphone. He's not there. When you listen to guys like Harvick and Clint Boyer, who are active drivers, call a race on a Saturday for an Xfinity race, these guys bring a perspective to the broadcast that this guy just can't carry anymore. Add to that the fact that his jokes are old and corny and stale, and for a generation that's long gone in this sport. And then you pair that with somebody who's new and fresh like Jeff Gordon, and it's just awkward to watch. It's time to go. Well, Waltrip had not announced that he was going to retire prior to that. And the outcry was immediate upon the column's release, and he announced about 2 weeks later, okay, I'm going to call it quits. So now Fox is going to have at least a partially revamped broadcast booth for next year when they come back for the Daytona 500. Now, I don't say all of that to say let's talk about Darrell Waltrip and his impact in NASCAR broadcasting, but this is something that we have seen and continue to see across all of sport right now. Everybody seems to be chasing that magic youth movement in their broadcast booth, whether it's Sunday Night Baseball now with Baskersian and Jess Mendoza and Alex Rodriguez. Prior to that, it was Aaron Boone calling play-by-play before he took the Yankees job. Prior to that, you had all of the old schoolers in there, the Crooks and the people like that were around for years and years and years. Monday Night Football. We all remember what happened when John Madden left Monday Night Football, went on to Fox. Then what happened when he left Fox? We remember how Chris Berman ended at ESPN. Pat Summerall at Fox. Keith Jackson, legendary college football announcer. I remember the last couple of bowl games he called, and frankly, just how sad that was. So, I think a lot of this is exacerbated by the success that the NFL has had with Tony Romo. I think him coming on board as a broadcaster has done a lot of things. You want to talk about a guy who clearly has the acumen for the NFL of today and is incredibly articulate when it comes time to step behind a microphone and bringing that to fans. Everybody is chasing that. NASCAR, Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NFL, college football, everybody's chasing it. So what are you guys' thoughts on that? Are you on board with this? Do you see it? Do you agree with it? Have there been some of these instances when, frankly, it pissed you off to see some of these guys pushed out the door? Or did you think, no, it's the right call. It's time. It's old. Game's passed a guy by. It's time to move on. What do you guys think?
Well, I think my first couple thoughts are there are some voices that you just associate with sports. Vin Scully, calling Dodger games out there on the radio. Realized that he was good all the way up until he decided that he wasn't going to do it anymore. Doc Emmerich calling hockey. You've got the voices of NASCAR, college football. They're iconic voices out there, but at some point, the voice alone isn't able to get it done anymore. Like you mentioned, there's times where you've heard the same line, the same analysis comes at every point during the same game. And they don't tend to evolve. And in those instances, I don't mind seeing, that particular person being phased out for somebody new.
Right.
The youth movement.
Berman was a great example of that because so
Exactly.
much of what he did on the air was built around the shtick. And I've heard other sports guys go on about just how old it got to watch or listen to him in the home run competition. Back. It's like, Chris, it's the home run derby, man. We know it's coming. You don't have to hammer us with that. And you got all the shtick whenever he would call the NFL draft, the Sunday nights on prime time. And I love Berman, but he was one of the ones that I was like, all right, buddy, let's see what else we got in the cupboard here.
Yeah, and along with that youth movement comes the second part of being a television personality, which is how many social media followers do you have? So you see so many of these older broadcasters who, yes, they may have gotten a Twitter account. Yes, they've got a Facebook page. They might be doing something on Instagram, but that was because somebody told them, hey, to stay relevant, you've got to be on these platforms. But so many of these new, young, fresh faces have spent their whole lives on these platforms and have garnered a large following outside of the airtime that they get through their regional sports net or any of the national sports outlets that are covering these major events. So the broadcasting companies and the sports properties are looking at these folks and saying, well, now not only am I getting coveted airtime between in primetime sports blocks, but I'm also able to have this person tell our story anytime, anywhere to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers on their social media accounts, which is something that I think some of these and for lack of a better term, the old guard just doesn't have that same capability.
If you look at how sports is set up, you have the same problem when it comes to coaching. And you look what happened here in Tallahassee with Bowden. Bowden is a coaching legend, and I don't think anybody can look at anything different on that. Mike Martin is a coaching legend. You can't look any different. But at some point, you hit that pinnacle, and I don't think anybody realizes it. You start going on the other side of it, and okay, he's slipping a little, and then it comes back up. Well, there's nothing different when it comes to broadcasting. Once you leave that booth and you leave the field and you go to the booth and you look at what's going on in front of you, the game changes. In NASCAR, they change their packages every year on the vehicles to where it's a different race. Yeah, you can talk about what it's like to be behind the wheel, but the further you get away from actually having been behind the wheel of the car and what you're looking at there, I think it just starts to fade. Same thing with football. Things are changing in football. Defenses are different because they're having to keep up with offenses. So, yeah, Tony Romo's going to know what's going on. And he was like a prognosticator last year where you look and, hey, this situation, this is what's going on, this is probably what they're going to do, because he had just been in those situations and knew the type of offense and the type of defense that was going through. You give him 10 years, and as things begin to shift away from what he's used to, he's going to have the same problem. It's great to have those guys that are right off the field right now, but you also have to have those guys that are timeless. You have to have those guys that, as the maybe not the play-by-play, or as the play-by-play. You need that guy's the play-by-play to be the one to talk about what's going forward. Have your color guy be the one that's more up to date and probably change that one out. I just think that it's just the nature of sports. As time marches on, you're going to have people that explain it. And then something we've talked about on this show a lot, you have to find a way to keep the new audience engaged. And quite frankly, no one here that's under the age of 30 is going to look at that and go, hey, yeah, that guy used to race. He knows what he's talking about. They don't care. They can go on the internet and they can become, and I'm using this in quotes, an expert on how things happen on the track because they've read 2 or 3 stories about it. They've read 2 or 3 people talk about it. And so for them, they feel like they're going to know more unless you're giving them something they don't know or something that they don't understand. And I think that's just kind of where we've gone to in sport at this point in time.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that. I do think there are instances though when guys really, even the play-by-play guys, really just don't need to be calling a game anymore. I can remember, God bless him, the late Pat Summerall, man. His last couple of years at Fox, it was just arduous to listen to him call a game. On the flip side of that, I can't ever remember a time when I heard Al Michaels call a bad game. He's one of those timeless voices that I'd never heard fade. He was always solid, regardless of whatever sport or event he was calling. So I do think it's a case by case thing. I think you're spot on though with the color guys. I think that after a while you run your course when you're so far removed from what it was you used to do as a craft. You just don't understand the way that craft is handled anymore. Guys who play quarterback now in the NFL, or guys who played quarterback in the NFL, let's say back when Joe Theismann was in the game, I just don't see how you're going to contribute too terribly much to the conversation now in 2019. Part of that's because I don't like Joe Theismann. I think he's a tool. But, but that's kind of my thought on that. Let me throw one other little element out to this little equation. You guys can weigh in on how much you think this is or is not a factor. How much are finances a part of this? ESPN's troubles with money have been well chronicled. It seems like every year we're reading about some massive purge where they're cutting loose half of their talent and keeping the folks who are around on peanuts because they're losing money hand over fist. How much of this is guys hit a certain point in their careers when, frankly, they're just commanding too much of a salary, and nowadays networks just don't feel like they have to pay that money anymore? Scott, you're a sport business guy, man. What do you think about that?
That's interesting. Quite honestly, I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about not being able to command an audience outside of the set times that your face is going to be on television. Because even those opportunities on social media can be monetized, and they can drive website views, and they can drive clicks, and they can drive storylines and things through social media that they just don't necessarily have the time to do on traditional television broadcasts. So, the financial model is tough for some of these networks. They paid huge rights fees to get for the rights to broadcast these events, and then they've got to turn around and not only do they have to break even on that commitment, but they now have to beholden to shareholders and things like that, where that money's got to come in. So anywhere they can cut costs and still get the same or better output, you're starting to see that being a little bit more of a ruthless tactic, so to speak, where the loyalty just isn't there to someone who may deserve a chance.
Right.
I think that part of the issue going on too is if you look at what's going on at ESPN, they've spread themselves so thin with everything that they do. There was a joke that from one of the movies back in the '90s, about the Ocho. I think it was in Dodgeball, and how ESPN's got all these channels and they're constantly trying to put content on there. Well, when you take the same amount of stuff, only so many people are going to want to watch Thursday night handball. Only so many amount of people are going to want to watch certain things going on. When you're taking all of your talent and you're spreading it that thin, and everything and your content and spreading it that thin, I think you're going to end up with those monetary issues, and that's exactly what ESPN's doing now anyway.
All right, well, let's kind of take the sport business hats off for a second and just go back to being fans. Both of you guys, Dave, I'll go ahead and let you start off first on this one. Give an example of somebody, of a player turned color commentator that you thought really, really panned out well, and then one that flopped for you.
It turned out really, really well. Really Romo. I mean, if you look at everything that happened last year and how he was going through, he kept you in the game in between. When you're leading up to the snap, I mean, a lot of times that can be annoying to hear. Because everyone wants to opine or go through, this and that. But he actually kept you interested in what was going on and explained what you were looking at. And for someone that never played football, didn't really understand, I understand to a certain extent how and why people go into motion, but what's going on with certain things, I think he did a great job with that. And I think the most recent when it comes to a flop is going to be Jason Witten. It was clunky. It was everything that Romo was not. It was just terrible to listen to. It was hard to listen to, and it made me want to mute the TV.
It's always good to see the Cowboys at 500. Scott, go for it. What do you got?
Someone who I think is at least a former player who's entertaining. It's You kind of want to tune in to listen to Bill Walton call a basketball game because you're not quite sure what's going to come out of his mouth.
Right.
The video of him eating that cupcake with a candle on it. I mean, that gets me every time. He just takes the whole thing and shoves it in his mouth,
Right.
with total disregard that there's a lit candle on it. I mean, that kind of stuff is just entertaining. And so, a game is on with him broadcasting. It's worth a listen. It's worth being a part of. As far as former guys that don't really care for, it's tough. I think there have been a lot of baseball guys over the years that have come out and they just quite didn't understand that not everyone wanted to hear every last little detail about how they played or what they would be doing in this situation if they were still tying up the laces and putting the glove on, heading out to the field. There's a lot of baseball teams. Every one of them has a radio broadcast, which is somewhat essential to the feel of a baseball team, as well as the TV broadcast. And they're always looking for somebody to be the new fresh face, and it doesn't always work out that way. Which is why you've got guys like Brenneman and I mentioned Vin Scully earlier that have done it for years, and when you're good at it, you're good at it, and and it really shows through.
Cincinnati Reds baseball is going to be a different place next year without Marty Brenneman, man. It's going to be a sad place. I don't know who's going to take over that chair, but they got ginormous shoes to fill. All right, so my take. Let's see here. As far as kind of players turn color guys, I'll stick with NASCAR here, man. NBC hit a home run with Dale Earnhardt Jr. He's a little raw in terms of his technical ability as a play-by-play man. Clearly, he's still learning what it means to be a broadcaster. But the insight that he brings, coupled with his charisma and his energy, watching the race on Sunday afternoon was absolutely a treat. When it's going nuts on the track, he's going nuts in the booth, and it's fun to listen to. But again, he can back that energy up with saying, "Here's what's going on in that car right now, and I can tell you exactly what this driver is thinking and what's going on because I was just there 2 years ago." So he's been very much a success in my book, and frankly, I think that's one of the reasons why Fox is kind of reaching to find their identity in the new era of NASCARs because. I mean, the contrast between Fox and NBC and youth versus old guard is so stark because of that hire. As far as players that didn't work out in broadcasting, I'll go with Eric Dickerson on Monday Night Football. That's a guy that did not need to be roaming the sidelines. Heck of a player, absolutely heck of a ball player, but not a guy that needed to be interviewing people. He's no Susie Colbert. We'll put it at that.
By saying he's no Susie Colbert, does that mean Joe Namath does not want to kiss him?
Oh, yeah. I actually heard an interview with her a while back on that. They had a long heart-to-heart. I don't know how long after that incident it was, but he called her and said, "We need to talk." And that guy hasn't had a drop of alcohol since that day.
Well, good for
He's
him.
been stone cold sober ever since that event. And she said he was a class act. And she's actually pretty well done with talking about that now. When people are asking her about it, she's very quick now to say, "You know what, I've said everything I can say about that. I don't have anything new there. Moving on." So, all right, well, speaking of questions, we've actually got some from listeners. So, you guys want to answer some?
Let's open it. Let's do it.
All right, dude,
Fire
mail.
away.
Here we go.
You got mail.
All righty. Question number one. Where are my questions? My questions are right here. Question number one comes from Keith. This one comes in via email, which you can do. dudesinhyperspace@gmail.com. That's where you find us. Hey guys, I know this is a little late, but have any of you seen Captain Marvel? If so, what were your thoughts? Any of you guys seen Captain Marvel? It's out on Redbox now.
We did see Captain Marvel.
Okay, what'd you think?
It was I give it a good B to B plus. I think for a new type of superhero that the Marvel doesn't necessarily didn't, in my opinion, didn't necessarily have. I think it was a fun way for someone to sort of backstory to get them involved, and then obviously with the Marvel universe sort of wrapping up and coming to an end, it was interesting to then go see that one, having known what had happened in Infinity War and some of those other films. So overall, solid movie.
I have not been able to see it yet. It's actually on the list. I just have not taken the time to actually go and watch it yet.
All right. Well, I actually caught it just this past weekend on Redbox, and I'll throw in with Scott. I don't know that I'm going to go so generous as to call it a B plus. I'm going to angle it a little bit more towards toward a C plus B minus. I mean, I don't think Marvel makes a bad movie, but I do think some films are better than others, and I'm going to put this one at the lower tier along the lines of like an Iron Man 3, which I also wasn't terribly high on. I didn't. Part of my problem with Captain Marvel is I'm going to play the Battlestar Galactica Homer here. Katie Sackhoff, who played Starbuck in Battlestar Galactica back in the early 2000s, was very much a fan favorite for that role. And now having seen Brie Larson in a full-fledged movie to catch 90 minutes to 2 hours with her, I really want Katie Sackhoff as Captain Marvel now, like really bad. I think she would have been superb as Captain Marvel. But that's just the BSG guy in me wanting to see his girl on the screen. Movie for movie, I thought it was, it did its job. I thought it was pretty predictable. I enjoyed all the 90s references. I'm 42. I grew up in Generation X. Seeing Blockbuster Video and Alta Vista and Radio Shack and all that was a lot of fun. The music was obviously really well chosen for that. Garbage, no doubt. It was all right there. Nirvana. So I enjoyed that part of it. I've also never been huge on Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, and it's been a while since we've seen this much Nick Fury in a film. He's typically kind of the guy pulling the strings from the outside, and this one he's front and center. I've just never thought much of Sam Jackson as the leader role. He's great at being what he is, which is the guy from Pulp Fiction. That's all that he's got, one speed, and that's it. So when it comes time to really look at him as a guy who's going to lead people, he just doesn't hit me with that. I've always been a big fan of, I remember when they were casting for that role, there was talk that Dennis Haysbert from 24, and the unit was up for that role. You guys know him as the guy from the Allstate commercials, and he played Serrano in Major League. Big dude, commanding voice. Having seen him in the unit particularly, he just oozes military, but he can also deliver some humor. So he was always my choice for that role, and they went with Sam because he was the name. But anyway, Captain Marvel, yeah, I'll go to C plus and stick with that. All right, moving on to question number 2. All right, this one comes from John via Facebook. What's up, dudes? Love the podcast. Keep up the great work. As a lifelong fan of pro wrestling, I've found myself bored with WWE in the last few years because, frankly, I find the stories and stars a bit stale. By contrast, I find the emergence of the new All Elite Wrestling very intriguing, so much so that I even purchased their debut pay-per-view, which was excellent. Are the three of you familiar with AEW, and if so, what are your thoughts? Dave, you're a wrestling guy. Go for it.
Yeah, so and actually a buddy of mine at work and I were talking about this a lot just the other day, and it's the stories. Back when, so in the '80s when everything was great and I was young and it was all the take your vitamins, say your prayers, the stories were good. You had that, it talked to that audience, and then you kind of had the same audience that when it grew up into the '90s, you had the non-PG version of the WWF. Even to the point where when they got sued and had to take Federation out of their name, it was, their whole moniker was "Get the F out." And so they then, once that competition went away, it's just, good Lord, it went downhill fast. With AEW, you have to find that good mixture of good storylines, things that people want to watch, and good matches. And Chris Benoit was always good at the technical part of everything that he did, and obviously everything that happened with him later on was terrible. But he had that technical part of it, and he was able to help tell a story in the ring and out of the ring. And you got these guys like The Rock and Stone Cold. AEW has picked up on some of that. They're starting to pick up guys that know how to get on the microphone. Chris Jericho, he's going to be out there. They have a pay-per-view this Saturday coming up. Chris Jericho is going to be involved with that. Cody and Dustin Rhodes are going to be involved with that. Guys that the WWE pushed up a little bit, got through, taught how to do the game, and then for whatever reason just didn't work out, and now they're out doing their own deal. It's worth watching. Everyone that I've talked to that's a wrestling fan says that we're waiting on the competition. It looks like even the WWF is starting, or the WWE is finally starting to get back into the point of they realize they're going to have to do something different because their ratings are sagging so bad.
Do you know what that different is? I don't know if you saw this in the news last week. Vince, I don't know how involved Vince was, but they have named new executive directors for Raw and for SmackDown. The executive director who will oversee, I'm guessing, the vast majority of the storytelling for Raw, Paul Heyman. The executive director for SmackDown, Eric Bischoff. That's how they spell different.
And that's I think more the same. And unless with Heyman was great coming through ECW, and that was what fueled all of that, was his storytelling. So how much are you going to handcuff these guys? How much are you going to tell them, okay, guys, that's a bit much. You need to get, to me, wrestling needs to get back, whether it be AEW or WWE, you need to get back into that part where Monday night at 9 o'clock, you're telling a story for adults. And then when you get to your Saturday shows, that's where you put the PG version on and you go, okay, this is what happened this week, and you beep out words or whatever you've got to do. But you've got to get back to what works. Compelling storylines that people actually want to get involved with, instead of everything that they've got going on now, which is just predictable, and what WCW became towards the end.
Yeah. Scott, you a wrestling guy?
Not nearly as much as you guys. I certainly spent a little bit of time watching it while I was in college, when some of those Steve Austin and The Rock were big names and things, but don't follow it that closely. But there's anytime you have some competition in a space or an industry, hopefully that fuels change. So we'll see how this goes for the AEW. Other wrestling has tried to take down the King, and hasn't gone so well for them. So we'll see if they can do anything new.
There's an author who he actually blurbed my book Colony's Lost. His name's John Hartness. Big bestseller behind the Quincy Harker series and Bubba the Monster Hunter. If you're fan of that genre, you know who John Hartness is. Anyway, he lives right down the road from me here in Charlotte, and is, when he's not writing, vampires and gore and monsters and all that good stuff, he is an avid wrestling fan. So he and I caught up for a chat at LibertyCon last weekend, and I put that to him. I'm like, AEW, what do you think? And he is amped. He's really jacked to see what that's going to become, for the exact same reasons that Dave outlined, and that is the much needed hole that we've had, the hole that we've had there for competition for so long. My thought on it is, and this is why I am actually kind of excited to see what AEW is going to become. They have three things, and best I can see, that all of the other challengers to the WWE throne have not had. They have a clear leadership with a plan in mind. All right? They know what they want to be, a clear understanding of brand and product. They also want to bring some new things to that product that WWE doesn't do. From what I understand of their model, they want to put a little bit more sports back into sports entertainment. They are trying to kind of go the baseball route with embracing analytics and measurables and things that fans can really sink their teeth into in the way of stats. That's not something you typically think of other than titles or number of times somebody's held the strap in wrestling. They want to get a bit more of that into play with their product. And then three, and this is probably the biggest thing of all that they have that I don't think anybody else has had since Ted Turner, that is they've got really deep freaking pockets. All right, when Shad Khan is behind your operation, you've got some money to play with. He's the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's also a billionaire. So really, really, really interested to see where that's going to go. I will most definitely be watching. I'll close with this on this one. We'll move on to the next question. Dave, you said their next pay-per-view is this weekend. They've got one coming up in August in Chicago. Mark my words, if CM Punk walks out at that pay-per-view, it's on like Donkey Kong. If they bring him to the table, it's freaking on. So, all right, question number 3. This one comes to us from Rich, who subscribes to our channel on YouTube. Appreciate that, Rich. Hey, fellas, let's talk some grilling. We are always a fan. Chicken wings, naked or breaded? Go. Scott, take it.
You definitely have to take the breading off. Let's go naked chicken wings. You put them in the... you fry them up really good, put them on the grill for a little bit, towards the end. A good buffalo sauce. Can't beat it.
Dave?
Oh, naked. You can't. I mean, the breadings, naked. For me, and Ian and I have talked about this ad nauseum. There is some Greek seasoning that I love putting on wings. A little bit of olive oil when you put them on the grill. Throw that Greek seasoning all over that, crisp them up on both sides, and they are amazing that way. So yeah, definitely naked.
I'm also gonna complete the 1,000 here and say naked all the way. I've never been a big fan of breaded wings. I can eat them, but not my thing. When it comes to how to cook them, I can certainly get on board with grilling them. I can certainly get on board with frying them. Of late, though, the thing I've been doing with mine is I smoke them. I hit them with a little bit of olive oil and then a little bit of seasoning, whether it's just a basic Lowry seasoned salt or the Greek seasoning. I can't remember the brand on that, but you just look for Greek seasoning down the season aisle at your grocery. You'll probably find it's a red and white bottle. But I put a little bit of olive oil to get it good and crispy and hit it with the seasoning, roll it around a little bit, and then I smoke them over chips for about 3 hours at 225, pull them out, drop them in some sauce. I typically go with a traditional buffalo. And then Cattleman's makes a really good kind of sweet and hot sauce called Carolina Tangy that, for my money, pairs magically with smoke, with a good smoke. They're really good off the grill, too, if you're looking for a different type of wing. But there's something about that sauce that does really, really well when you pull them out of a smoker. So naked all the way.
The Greek seasoning is Cavender's.
Cavender's.
And it's a red and yellow container.
Red and yellow. Okay, all right. I knew it started with a C. I don't know why I couldn't get behind that. But all right, well, thanks everybody for the questions. We really appreciate it. As always, we love hearing from you guys. Number of ways you can hit us up. The email account I mentioned a second ago, dudesinhyperspace@gmail.com. You can also get us at the website, dudesinhyperspace.com. We're on Facebook and Twitter at the Hyper Dudes. If you're doing it on Twitter, use the hashtag DudeMail. And we are happy to answer your Dude Mail questions, whatever they may be. So this is going to bring us on down close to the hour. Let's move on to White Flag.
White White Flag.
So, okay, White Flag is the portion of the show where we just basically tell listeners what's on our radar coming up here in the next few weeks. So, Scott, I'll start with you, man. What are you looking forward to? Can be geek stuff, sports stuff, food stuff, summer stuff, family stuff, whatever, man. What's on your docket in the next couple of weeks?
Well, we are hitting halfway point of the Major League Baseball season, so All-Star break, home run derby, paying attention to what's going on there and seeing, really who's going to be the buyer and seller as we get to the close in on the trade deadline for baseball this year. Should be fun. There's a lot of really good teams. The AL East is certainly tight with the Yankees, Red Sox, and Rays all within a few games of them. As we hit the halfway point. Also, something interesting is coming off the Women's World Cup and the USA's victory for their fourth World Cup. You've got ESPN and Budweiser stepping up to grab some broadcasts for the NWSL. It's the women's soccer league here in North America, and they've got all the talent that you would have seen. The top players from the Women's World Cup will be playing in that. So. This will be a big step if this is something that is really going to take off in America. It's going to start with people being able to watch it on a major network. Previous to this, they were on the Lifetime network. So to give you an idea of the difference on markets and who they were going after. So I got that on my radar. Obviously, I've got some catching up to do on Spider-Man. Here in the next couple weeks. But that's those are the things I've got going on.
Dave, what you got?
So coming up on July 19th, we have the new Lion King coming out. As a Disney fan, obviously, and it is a nostalgic thing for me growing up having seen that movie. I'm definitely interested in seeing how that turns out. Unfortunately for me, soccer is a lot like presidential elections. I only get somewhat excited about it every 4 years, and then I just catch the highlights on the news.
It's very helpful when you get to watch your daughter play it every weekend. So you get way more into it. Take a little time, watch some soccer. It's a good time.
You definitely have a leg up on that. For me, I just don't have the investment. Also coming up in the next few months that I'm looking forward to is the movie It Chapter 2. I really enjoyed when they redid that a couple of years ago. I'm looking forward to what they're going to do with the continuation of the story, which is basically the second half of the book. I'm really looking forward to the clown to see how it goes that way.
Nice. Well, I will follow suit then. I am also looking forward to a couple of different sporting things going on. Most notably for me, obviously, it's going to be NASCAR. We are closing down the end of the regular season and ramping down toward the playoffs. There's a couple of guys on the bubble, namely Clint Boyer, looking at you, Hoss. Really kind of want to see if they can rally. If they can win a race, then you're in. And they have pretty well reached that point. Points are no longer an option for these guys. They've got to race their way in. And that makes for some fun drama. That's not really a whole lot on my geek radar right now. Comic-Con is coming in a couple of weeks, so typically there's a big flurry of news that comes out of that. I'll be keeping an eye on that. But as far as viewable material, Spider-Man Far From Home was kind of my last one for a little while. Once we click on down into the fall, we've got Joker on the way. I'm really amped about that. Then naturally a couple of other odds and ends before you get to Star Wars in December. But that's pretty much where I'm at right now with that. So, all right, guys. Well, good stuff as always. We will certainly catch you on the flip side for the next time. As always, guys, feel free. Something occurred to me. I've got to stop saying as always. It's like a stinking drinking game with me at this point. Crutches, they're a thing in broadcasting. DudesInHyperspace.com. Go check us out. You can also send us an email or hit us up on social media with your questions. We do love hearing from you guys, as always. Now I'm going to go take some cough medicine because I'm just at that point. Peace out,
Wait,
y'all.
You did this entire show without cough medicine?
What?
It didn't seem like it.
I need a reload on cough medicine. You people suck. All right, we're out.
Thanks for soldiering on.
Yeah. All right.
Bye.
Good night, all.